In our last episode, I built this gorgeous cave factory, providing me with everything that I need to light up my future factories. But after many hours of building this, I became enlightened, understanding that I need one tool to make my life 100 times easier in future builds, and that is the hover pack. However, that does require tier 7, and unfortunately, I've not started producing adaptive control units or modular engines, both of which require rubber and plastic, which we're not producing in large enough quantities. Why am I building this if we already have plastic? Well, we can't stop now. So I'm going to set out to build the most efficient plastic and rubber plant possible using an alternate recipe, or several alternate recipes, to turn 2,400 crude oil into 7,200 plastic and rubber. Now for that, we're going to need a large space, and I have the perfect place in mind: the blue crater. So here we have 6 oil nodes providing a max production of 2,550 crude oil per minute, which is more than enough. And on top of this, we're going to need water. Check. And the following alt recipes: heavy oil residue, recycled plastic, and recycled rubber. But how does it all work, you say? Well, we're going to be using 80 refineries to turn the 2,400 crude oil into heavy oil residue, and then send the heavy oil residue on along with 6,400 packaged water to 107 refineries to become diluted packaged fuel. Oh yeah, we're also going to be using that alternate recipe as well. We will then unpackage the fuel with 107 packages, or is that packages, I guess. Regardless, the 6,400 fuel will then go on to a total of 112 refineries, which use rubber and fuel to create plastic. Of course, we are going to need rubber to start off with, so to get that, we're going to be combining the 1,600 polymer resin from the heavy oil residue plant with water at another 40 refineries. We'll then send the rubber to the plastic plant, but in order to create more rubber, we need to send some of the plastic that we're producing to another 103 refineries producing recycled rubber, allowing us to produce a total of 3,600 rubber and 3,600 plastic per minute. It's convoluted, I know. And before anyone asks, we're not using blenders because we haven't got access to them yet. So in short, this is going to be a very large build, especially given we only need about 30 rubber and 156 plastic to produce the space elevator parts that I need. But you know what they say? Go big or go home.
Right.
First off, we're going to be setting up a train line between here and my current base. Now we're going to need a huge amount of resources, so this is going to make going back and forth easier. Next, we'll get started building the first factory. I've opted for multiple factories across the Blue Crater Lake. What could possibly go wrong? Because I'd love to see all the resources moving between the factories, but with this being a large build, I'll probably be skipping a lot of the finer details. Now you can see the outline of the build here. The plan will be to fit all 80 refineries producing the heavy oil residue within the factory frame that you see here. And eventually we'll then add the walls and decoration. For the refineries, I'm using a basic 3 refinery blueprint, creating 8 lines of 10 refineries. And here we have it. Each line produces 400 heavy oil residue. This will then go on to become diluted packaged fuel, but before we do that, we'll need to turn this 1,600 polymer resin into rubber. And we'll do that in a smaller factory to the right of this. So next we need to run all this resin over there using this bus. Now I've set this factory up using the same refinery blueprint we used previously, and with the polymer resin coming in here, all we need to do is bring the water from the lake down there. In total, we're going to need 1,600 water here. So I am going to overclock each of these extractors to provide 200 water. And whilst we're at it, I'm also going to get started on the other water extractors that'll be providing the diluted packaged fuel plant with 6,400 water. The plan will be to have the water packages on the northeast bank to create a loop between the refineries for the packaged fuel and the unpackages. So with the residual rubber factory running, we can now get started on the first packaging section. Starting off, we need to take all the water to the top using this ramp. Now, the main importance to me here for this factory is to make it visually interesting. So I plan on being able to work off and on different grids, as well as using curves to break up the blocky areas. And I hope to make this more of a focal point later on when it comes to decorating and adding the final details to this factory. This section here will be perfect for the first set of packages. It's nice and open, and I'm going to use the natural stepping of the cliffs to play around with the different height levels for the other factories as well. At this point, I've laid out the first 7 lines of packages. You can see I've added some decor using beams and pillars. Thinking about it though, I should have added some lighting beneath them, but I'm not going to redo the blueprints now. Also, I should mention this blueprint, along with all the others that we use, are available on my Patreon page. Now, each of these lines are split into 300 packaged water and 240 packaged water, which will go up to our fuel plant shortly. But first, I need to finish the floor above this. With the water packages now done, we also have the diluted packaged fuel refineries to do. So I'm going to need 107 refineries placed here. We're then going to combine the heavy oil residue from earlier with the packaged water. I haven't bussed the water yet though, but we will once we've laid out the factory and know where everything's going. Unfortunately, the coral trees seem to be in the way of my plan here, but as they say, it's not a mistake, just a happy accident. So we're going to frame this and hopefully light it up as the center feature for this factory. It also means that we can't have 5 lines of 20 refineries here. So we'll sandwich this in between 2 of the lines and then have 3 more lines of refineries above this. I'm really happy with the overall design here, and we'll only add to this once the factories are up and running. Most importantly, I've also done all of the conveyor logistics. I actually confused myself a little bit halfway through because I forgot some lines were running less resources than others, but I think I've sorted it all out now. So onwards and upwards and onto the unpackages now. So we need to take all of the packaged fuel across to the top corner of the blue crater. This time, rather than sending different amounts on each of the lines, I've balanced the lines out. So with the exception of 2 lines, there should be a total of 480 fuel per minute to transport, which means all I need to do is place 12 lines of 8 unpackages and then send the empty canisters back to the water packages, creating an endless loop for the canisters, which I'll add manually at the end. With the unpackages done, we can play about with the design. I told myself that I wouldn't decorate until it's finished. That way, if I needed to tear down a wall to rework a line, I haven't wasted that much time, but decoration is life. So I'm going to do a little bit and play around and show you the finished product once it's done. I'm pretty happy with the overall look that we've got here and the design of the factory. I've used a lot of natural light for the top floor to seep through, and I've added gaps in the ceilings to let even more light in whilst breaking up all the flat lines the current factory has. But what I'm loving most of all is all the variance between all the factory shapes we have going here. It's really shaping up nicely. Pun not intended.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
But for now, I need to get started on the plastic and rubber recycling plant. For this, I will have the first line taking the rubber from earlier and turning it into plastic. From here, half will be sent to the storage and the other half will be sent to become rubber, and this will be repeated with plastic until all 200 odd refineries will be dedicated to production or storage. I've dedicated the whole upper northwest side of the crater to this factory and will be spread across a total of 3 floors. So once I've laid out each line of 16 refineries, we'll pipe the fuel and make sure that it's buffered prior to being sent to the factory to reduce sloshing further down the line. So hopefully we'll have no issues starting the factory due to pipes this time. I've also had the idea of adding colours to the factories with signs to resemble what's being produced, such as the heavy oil to fuel plant here. So we have purple and then orange. So I'll probably put some time towards doing that in between these factory lines for the other factories too. Now, I've always struggled with piping, and I've spent the last couple of hours trying to run the fuel to the factory, but there's just so much pipe. All I seem to be doing is going back and forth, getting plastic for the Mark II pipes. Wait, why am I building this if we already have plastic? We're just sinking. I'm a total numpty. Well, we can't stop now. I don't think I really comprehended how large this factory would be. I'm now, 80 hours into this build, and we're just getting towards the end. So I'm going to quickly wall all of this up and run the lines to 2 train stations, one for plastic and the other for rubber, and then we'll turn it on. That way we can sync the plastic and the rubber and make sure that everything's running efficiently. Okay, so I have a confession. I may have spent the last few hours doing a bit of decorating. We're by no means done decorating, but I have just connected the whole factory to the power grid as well. And as it's all connected to this breaker room, it's the perfect time to switch it on and see just how efficient this factory is. I'm a little concerned that the max consumption is about 15,000 megawatts higher than my current production. But that is largely due to our large scaling facility, which won't actually be running at full capacity prior to us hitting nuclear power, which we will do in time for 1.0, I assure you. Anyway, back to the factory. After a few minutes warming up, we should be able to see the resources starting to run. Everything should be running, but it's not. I did have a few resources earlier, but given it's all stopped, my plan of a super efficient factory is seemingly inefficient right now. What's odd is some lines are saturated while others aren't. And I've also produced some plastic and rubber, so I'm not really sure what the issue or where the issue is. So I'm gonna have to spend some time working out what the problem is. Okay, so I think we have an issue with output lines oversaturating. Because if I flush these pipes, the canisters and empty canisters start running, followed by plastic and rubber. And you can see here, we should see resources flow from the middle and then slowly outwards until all of them are running, like this. So it looks like it's slowly turning on. Perhaps I just needed to flush the system. I'll give it a few minutes more and hopefully the lines should each be running more or less to full capacity.
1 minute, 37 seconds later.
So everything's just ceased running. I think this is the biggest screw up I've ever done in Satisfactory. Currently, I've wasted 100 hours here. The problem is, with us having multiple factory lines, they're all dependent on one another to constantly flow. However, once one section backs up, the whole system follows because they're reliant on one another. And I stupidly have run the logistic lines without considering which line each factory connects to. And I did this because I wanted to see all the resources flowing along the factory lines. And obviously that's not happening. I should have seen this coming.
You fell victim to one of the classic blunders.
So to kind of break it down, for example here, each factory is made up of, let's say, 3 lines, and each factory line has to match up to the partnered input line of another factory in the same sequence. So the first factory's line 1 goes to line 1 of the second factory and then on to the next one. And the second line goes to line 2 at the second factory and so on. However, I've done it so that factory line 1 connects to line 3 of factory 2 and line 3 goes to line 2, and this is across all 4 factories. So the plastic and rubber recycling plant, the packagers, the unpackagers, and also the heavy oil residue to diluted packaged fuel plant. And more problematic with this is that we're also dealing not just with solids, but also liquid outputs, which has really exacerbated the whole situation. So in short, everything is oversaturated or empty because they're reliant on outputs of factories further down the circuit. So I have screwed up big time, and thinking about it, I should have done all of the packaging and unpackaging on dedicated lines within the same diluted packaged fuel factory, because it's a 1:1:1 ratio on all of them. So given that, I'm going to work out the solution on my next few streams on twitch.tv/Totalxclipse, and hopefully we'll work out whether we have to just redo all the logistic lines, which I think is going to be 20 hours in itself, tear the factory down, or rework some parts to try and fix this. So guys, I really apologize. The most efficient factory that I endeavored to build has become the most inefficient build I have ever done. But I do promise you, we will fix it. And I guess the silver lining is that you'll get to see how I fix large builds. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do hit the thumbs up, and if you want to see more, don't forget to subscribe. Special thanks does go to all of our supporters on Patreon, most notably our Soloclipse patron, Firefless, as well as our Lunas, the Calamity, Ben, and Star, and our Blood Moon of the day, which today is Dr. Shotgun. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.